are three things you can do to help us out.
One, you can make sure you subscribe to this channel.
Two is you can leave a comment here or on Apple Podcasts.
And three, if you really want to help, you can follow this link to see how you could be a supporter on Patreon.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another Word in Your Attic. Now, Dave and I often talk of our fondness for the pop acts who were around at the time that we were at Smash Hits in the early 80s. And one in particular we liked so much that we put their singer on the cover twice in 4 months. Unprecedented. Duran Duran green with envy. And so it's lovely to see you again after only 40 years. It's the great Nik Heyward. Nik, lovely to see you.
Thank you so much, guys. It's like, rock journalism at its best here. I really think to be here.
Do you remember going to see Haircut 100? You and I
do.
At the Hammersmith Odeon. And what I remember is that was your kind of nautical clothes phase. And there were people all around us, weren't there, Dave, in chunky cable knit sweaters and somebody wearing a sou'wester. Remember? I think a guy in front of us, a big yellow sou'wester. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well,
Can you just hold up that copy of Smash Hits with Nik on the cover, Mark? Just hold it up again. Hold it up to the camera. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, how many is it? 40 years between that picture and the one? I mean, that is. I'm sorry. I think there's something in the water. We've been discussing this recently. We did we did chats with Toya Wilcox and Claire Grogan or whatever. And we're discussing how the people of the 80s are sinfully well preserved, it seems to me.
I know. Toya looked younger, actually. I mean, unbelievable. And Nik, as do you. That's ridiculous.
Well, we're all going to be bones soon, just dust. And so,
really, on a happy note.
I love my grandchildren so much that I want to stay alive for them. And that's the main fuel behind why I stay healthy. I mean, it doesn't matter about looks. That's
good for you. How many grandchildren have you got?
Well, 3.
Fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. God, you're way ahead of us.
And I love
3 between us.
Around for them.
Yeah. Sensation. Yeah. So you're out in Florida now, aren't you? That's where we're talking to you.
Yeah, we're in Florida at the moment.
In ridiculous heat.
Yes, it is ridiculous. Sarah, my wife's parents live locally, so we were coming over to visit them, and we just thought it was a time when in the UK it was really difficult to get a mortgage.
Yeah.
But not very difficult here. I mean, they give them
right.
Yeah.
candy.
Yes. Hence the economy. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but listen, Nik, the way we normally start these chats is traditionally we ask people if they can remember what was the music playing equipment in your home when you were a child. Was it a record player? Was it a cassette player? What was there?
It was a stereo, and it was a Sanyo.
Oh, right.
Yes, it was good, but it wasn't high quality. It was probably because we were like a commercial family. Mum played Carpenters. Dad loved his jazz, like Stan Kenton, Dave Brubeck, Oscar Peterson, who I went to see. Thankfully, had a father that took me to see those gigs.
Oh, so, really?
Aged what? Well, how old were you when you went?
Peterson, and yeah, I was about 10 when I saw them.
It's fantastic. And where was it? You were born? Was it Beckenham? You were brought up?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
and so that's interesting. So you were born, I think, about 10 years before Bowie was living there in Haddon Hall. Was there any of the kind of local legend of David Bowie around at that time, or did that just develop later?
Oh no, he was a legend. It definitely. He's him and Sparks. There was lots of people that lived there. I saw Sparks in Beckenham High Street outside.
Of course, they lived there, didn't they? That's right.
Yeah, and I'd just been to see them at Fairford Halls.
Yeah,
it was their last gig before they left the UK for America for 20 years, I think it was.
Yeah.
Right. And, so I saw them and I thought, oh, wow, they exist. This is weird. I'd watched them on Top of the Pops, and that was some performance on that Top of the Pops performance. It was just, it blew the whole of the music world apart. It was like everybody said, we've just seen Hitler on top of the Pops.
That's right.
it was. I mean, everybody at our school the next day was just like, "Mate, did you see that? What was all that about?" And there it was, So, and I saw them in the high street. People off the telly. They were real.
And the great thing about Sparks is they always went out dressed as Sparks, didn't they? They made absolutely no attempt to conceal who they were, just very much the opposite.
They were from space, landed in Beckenham High Street.
Yeah.
And I'd seen them and they were real, I mean, even when you see them on stage, you don't really think they're real. I thought you kind of think they're just like put in pods, back of the stage, out of the pod.
Yeah.
Of course, all that has now been, I've realised that what goes on behind the stage, and what actually goes on.
Yeah.
Right.
The myth has been busted, but I still like to think people do land in pods somehow.
I think so.
So, what were the first records you bought yourself or had bought for you? Can you remember? Was it comedy records, children's records, or whatever?
Well, I've got a few.
Go on. Come on, show them up. Yeah.
I had the luxury of a elder brother, about a year and a half older, so his musical tastes were advanced, very and absolutely immaculate taste in music. And there was one album that I was playing stuff, but I wasn't really buying stuff. So I was just, I was listening to, Pete's room, Pete, my brother, his room was purple and filled with Wem amplification. So
really?
Wem, and a Wem copycat. And so I would go walk past this magical room, this purple room.
Room, brilliant.
And there was a fragrance of kind of rock coming out of this room. I wasn't allowed in it, of course. And so I used to sneak in when he wasn't there, and it was like this magical realm. And, I'd heard things like Ride a White Swan coming out of there and Hold Your Head Up by Argent. If you hear that Argent, that song, I still play it now, and I am brought to tears, of beautiful tears of joy listening to Argent, Hold Your Head Up High. Everything about it. I don't think like a month goes by when I don't put that on. And that's the wonder of all like Spotify and Apple and stuff. You can go into all the records.
So are you instantly transported back to the purple room, the fragrance of rock? You probably are, yeah.
Pete's Pod, and in Pete's Pod was one of the most magical albums I've ever heard. I think still one of the best records ever made, and it is this.
Oh, the first Montrose album. Yes. Now you're talking. Yes.
This, I don't know why everybody doesn't listen. Every rock band should hear this and go,
that's where years later, the same producer did the same sound with Van Halen and made a fortune. And Montrose just missed the boat by being too early, basically, didn't they?
Yeah, they were early birds, because I thought this was what rock was. So when I was, the solo on like Good Rockin' Tonight, that's when I'm young, I'm hearing this. This is the bar. This is it. So I'm just thinking, imagine playing a solo like that on stage somewhere. Like you go to school and there's a stage and the headmaster's talking from the stage, and you think, I want to be on that stage. That's what I want to be. I want to be on that stage. That's it, and then you go home and you hear the music blaring out, and Pete's out, and you pop into the pod and you hear it, and you can put on all these records, and it's like Ride a White Swan. You go, what's a swan? Why is it white? Why is it riding? Why do you want to ride a white swan? What's all that about? And then later you read from you guys and you know what it is. Okay. At the time you just think, this is a magical kingdom of creativity, and this is nothing like reality. This is what it's all about. This is the stage. This is it, and I want to be on that stage. That was the beginning, definitely.
So you say it was a big turning point then?
Yeah, huge.
That's brilliant.
Before there was Quo, because Quo is just like, if you think Montrose is like really basic sex, it's kind of really basic. I don't want to get crude, but it's really basic. Well, Quo were like Plumber version of it, and really basic. So I liked all this really earthy, basic music that was coming up, and that just you felt it first. There's something about the movement of it that makes you feel the music before the song. The song isn't really that important at first. You're just hearing it. That's what rock, I think, that's what it does to you. It kind of it just grabs you by the scruff of the neck. And unlike school, it doesn't like punish you. It just makes you feel otherworldly.
Right. So you say your brother had the WEM speakers and so forth. Did he play music, or was he just somebody who listened to records?
Yeah, he played music. He had a band, and they were brilliant. And I used to just go and with stars in my eyes at my big brother playing in a band. And he used to wear, sometimes because he was always dressing up. He'd like wear a red shirt, a red tie, and he had a kind of perm like Phil Lynott. You know, Boys Are Back in Town was playing, and my brother was on stage, and they used to do She Does It Right by Dr. Feelgood, which used to go like the clappers. So everybody, you know, was moving. This was in Bromley. Mostly they played in Bromley, and Brian Jardine was the singer, and they were great. And then punk kicked off, and then so every band went that way. It was like you either went that way, if you remember rightly, or just died.
That's so true. I can just remember seeing all these kind of pop rock bands, and they just basically just, you know, well, the Stranglers are a really good example. Just played twice as fast, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, I was into the art scene just before punk kicked off because I was a huge fan of Don't Stop the World, Deaf School. That's one of my favorite.
Oh, right. Okay.
Capaldi's Cat.
Betty Bright's group.
Oh, yeah. And Clive Langer.
Clive Langer was in it. That's right. Yeah.
And, you know, Capaldi's Cat, if you listen to that, it's so raw. It's so punk. It's like they must have been fuming that punk came out because they were already doing it.
Yeah.
You know, it was raw and they were doing it. And it had a French tinge about it. And, it's such a beautiful album.
They're generally considered to be one of those groups that missed the boat and deserved to have.
Well, again, like Montrose, slightly too early.
Yeah.
You know, just your timing's out, I suppose, whether it's early or late.
Bands.
Yeah, it's just the way those things happen.
Yeah.
So, what was your brother's band called?
Unorthodox.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not a great name, is it?
No, they realise that, but you know. You know, I think we could have joined forces on that one. You know, they could have come to their little brother, you know, like in an Oasis kind of way.
Yeah.
You know, what about a name, Nick? You're good at coming up with shit like that.
All right.
Yeah.
So there was never a point where they said, you know, like this happened in many cases, like Oasis, like Neil Finn joined Split Enz. You were never encouraged as the younger brother to say, step up and join your older brother's band.
Well, there may have been moments, but it was more like I was petrified at the same time of being on stage. Like when we moved to this pub, they used to set their equipment up on the top floor, and so it was like a load of equipment surrounded by Alsatian dog poo because we had guard dogs, and so it like absolutely reeked. But when they weren't there, I used to go in there and just kind of like sing and just stand at the mic. None of the equipment was switched on, but I used to grab the mic and kind of like really give it some, you know. Around that time, it was probably the Pistols were kicking off, so I just go, Antichrist, and stand there and like give it. And then one day they said, well, do you want to come up and sing? And I did, just shout into the mic. And I think I didn't pass the audition.
Okay.
Who was the first band you saw then? Was we're going back before that? Can you remember the first gig you went to?
God, dear. Well, it was probably all those early gigs at Fairford Halls, you know.
Oh, the Montrose, all that lot, yeah.
Like Sparks, Caravan.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Detroit Spinners, who they're falling into line now. Griffin. They were really good.
Griffin? You would say Griffin?
Yeah, oh, my Lord.
That's fantastic.
Griffin. Didn't they play, didn't they have an album called Magic Mushrumps?
Mushrumps?
Yeah, Mushrumps.
They used to dress. Oh, you haven't got it, have you? Surely.
No,
that's fantastic.
Well, I tell you what was my favourite song of an album.
They played crumb horns and old medieval instruments.
Chris Squire Fitzgerald.
Oh, yeah.
I tell you what. The song on here, Hold Out Your Hand, is one of the greatest songs ever written. Have you heard it? Hold Out Your Hand.
I can't say I have.
Oh my God, it's so rousing. The bass line has influenced me because I'm a really keen bass player. Like, you know, I play bass on most of my records now, and that's because I can't wait to get to it. It's like, do all the rest of the stuff so I can play bass.
Yeah.
And it's like, every time I play bass, it's like things like Chris Squire come into mind, Colin Moulding, you know, these bass players that have just kind of like nailed it. But Chris Squire he swims around like a fish on this song. It's
lead bass, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, and so as a young kid, I was just like, this was one of my brothers I nicked, by the way. You know, this not actual one, because I bought this the other day in Sound Exchange in Tampa, which is my new home.
Yeah.
So I suppose that was a time, mid-70s, when bass players were suddenly they were in the spotlight, weren't they? With Stanley Clarke, Jaco Pastorius, you know, Chris Squire and so forth. Of course, yes, they all made solo albums and they all put them out in the same week or something like that.
Week. Very competitive.
Well, like this was one of my favorites and my mother's actual favorite album.
Oh, the Six Wives of Henry VIII.
Did your mum or you did she ever go and see them play? Wasn't that performed on ice when what was called the?
No, that was King Arthur, wasn't it?
King Arthur. That was King Arthur. Yeah.
Well, she didn't before she passed away, and my brother and I went to St George's Church in Beckenham last year or the year before. Now COVID messed things up a bit, but we went to see Rick Wakeman playing in the church there. And it was so emotional. It was really, really, really emotional. Yeah, and he played a Bowie song, and you know he's brilliant raconteur, isn't he? He's really
fantastic.
He's so
fantastic.
good.
He once presented a rock program called I think it's called Gas Tank. He was really good.
Tank.
Remember that, Dave?
Wow.
Yeah, I do.
It featured him sitting in a bar with a big old pint on the go. The days when he used to drink. And
I'm a huge Rick Wakeman fan.
Yeah, he's fabulous.
Massive. You know.
So did you have to keep quiet about all your prog rock kind of roots later on when you started getting bands yourself and making records yourself?
Of course we did. Yeah, absolutely. You know, do you think in Heiko 100, you know, going on in the NME, Paul Morley would have said, "So what are you into, Nick?" I'd have gone, "Well,
I got Chris Squire's solo album."
You know,
A trick of the tail.
Trick of the tail is the best. I mean, you know, Untangled. Oh my God, you know, there's two songs on that album that just finish me completely. Finish me. I still play them now, and they're reminiscent of Simon and Garfunkel, but it's like taken to another realm. It's like Simon and Garfunkel on acid, you know, or something, you know, a kind of contemporary drug at the time, you know. And the songwriting and the playing, and I mean, because I remember that was one of the songs. You Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe.
Yeah.
Songs that I heard from Pete's room when I was walking past, and I just thought, "What's that? That's the best thing I've ever heard in my life. What's that? There's sounds on it that like." And there's a guy speaking about being in a lawnmower. What's that? What? Why? Why is he in a lawnmower? And why is there a song about that? You know, because I'd grown up with songs that were kind of about stuff, you know, were about relationships or women or, you know, men, something, you know, human stuff. And then you've got songs about lawnmowers.
Yes.
You know,
and wardrobes.
Changed. Yeah. And I thought, you know, this is the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. You know, Pete's room is a pod. It's also a wardrobe, and it's to another realm, another world. You go in there. I mean, you close your eyes, listen to this music, and you are transported to somewhere way universal. It's universal. It's where all this stuff comes from when you write anyway. You know what it's like as a writer. If you're thinking too much, it's not flowing. You've got to let it come through you. And that's where, as a writer, you know, I'm always standing away from myself and thinking, right, okay, it's not about you at all. You know, you're just a conduit really here. It's just like, come on, allow this stuff to come through you. Because if you're standing in the way, you get consciously written stuff, you know, and you do read it back and you go, and somebody will spot it and they'll go, that's consciously kind of written. And they'll know by just not enjoying it, you know, where you've tried too hard or something in some sort of way. So when you're in and you're surrounded by all this music that is written from that place, and a band, they all come together, and with the producer, you know, with the engineer, with everybody, you know, everybody piles into this room to make this magic. And it's like really, really pulsating, and you know, everything. The amount of work that goes into getting it right is so immense that, you know, and you're getting the end result, you know, and everybody was really happy with this, and it is magical. And then it goes to be cut, and then you're hearing it, and it's like, wow, you know, everyone's happy, everyone involved. I mean, the A&R man probably had his mind blown off by listening to this, going, can you imagine, like, you know, I mean, I can't believe it only got to number 21, that song. Number 21. It's one of the best songs ever written.
There's a lot of competition.
Yeah, yeah.
So can you remember when you started writing songs yourself? Can you remember
what were you listening to?
when you first time that you wrote something, you thought, oh, that's quite good?
Yeah.
Can you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was called Spot Spread. And it said, I wake up in the morning and I feel a little spot protruding. I flick it and I lick it and I feel my little spot. It's messing me around. And the chorus was, it's messing me around. Oh. And that to me was the most important thing, because that was as close to XTC as I could get at that time. Because I had, like, there were records before, and then once I heard white music, it all just went, it turned into gobbledygook. Everything was just messed up in such a beautiful way. I stood in the Croydon Greyhound watching them, because that's where I found them first, was live. And they did Neon Shuffle, and they do that bit where they stop.
Yes.
And they stopped. And I've never seen this stop where nothing, silence. There it was. It's like, I was standing there just going, when are they going to start again? And how do they know when they're going to start again? How do they know that? And Colin Mouldring's hair was just, and he looked kind of like he had a cold sore, which I thought was cool as well. I was like, that's cool. And then, and they stopped all together, and Andy Partridge was like that. And Barry Andrews was like, this keyboard hung over, you know, and then they came in all together, you know, and I didn't know about time.
That's right. They used to freeze, didn't they?
Yeah.
They did.
On stage. I remember that. Yeah.
And
as if the whole movie had ground to a halt.
Yeah. And that frozen moment blew my head off. I just thought, that's it. This is what I want to do. Yeah. I want to be that. That is it. I want to stand on stage and freeze like that. You know, be in that silent moment. That's the most magical silence I've ever heard. That's it. Yeah.
When you were writing songs, then what kind of stuff was filtering through? Do you think that you've been listening to?
It was all punk.
It was punk.
Yeah, that was really what was kicking off. Because I just.
But Haircut 100 doesn't sound remotely. I mean, you're talking about before Haircut 100. You're talking about the earlier stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, because I couldn't play it. I couldn't play the music I'd been influenced by. I wasn't skilled enough. But I could play punk. So when I picked up a guitar, I could play a chord. I could play it here.
Yeah.
Right. I could play this. Oh, hold on. I was doing some hippie stuff last night.
All right.
That's when you drop an E. But you got to put it up.
Yeah.
So I used to play this because I learned this key from Talking Heads, which is another album that completely blew my head off. And that is, do you know that riff?
Yeah, I recognize it. Yeah.
What's it from?
No, not good. You pulled me up, up.
Right.
Woo! You know, and I was listening to this guy, and he was like, he was going to lose it any moment.
Yeah.
This guy, like, and the first time I saw David Byrne, I saw him. He had a yellow. It looked like a Fred Perry, a yellow Fred Perry, a semi-acoustic 12-string Gibson, I think it was, and I saw that picture and I thought, that's exactly how I want to look. I want that semi-acoustic sunburst. I want that yellow Fred Perry. I want that hair. I want the hairy arms that he's got. I never quite got there, but I want that bass player as well. Oh my God, Tina Weymouth. The Bob and the Mustang bass. I went straight out and bought a Mustang guitar. I got a cheaper version. It was like growing up, my brother had the chopper, and I used to have the chipper, which was emasculating to say the least. But it stood me in good stead, because when you're older, you think, I won't go for the Mustang, I'll go for the Music Master or the Jazz Master or something, which has only got the one pickup. But it's quite cool, and that's why I liked bands with one pickup, like the Feelies. Do you remember them?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love the
Yeah.
Feelies.
Yeah, so it's like I was really into monochrome set, the Feelies, and
Actually, the Feelies had the same sort of look as well as David Byrne, that slightly kind of a collegiate, slightly nerdy look, didn't
Yeah.
they? Plaid
I was
shirts.
into art
And
school
I
rock.
think there might even have been the odd kind of pastel-covered coloured jumper draped across
Yeah.
the shoulders,
Pastel was big.
which
You
I
know.
can remember you wearing on stage. You used to have.
Oh yeah, I wanted to go to art school, but I got one O level, and they wanted me to sit more. But I got a job at a commercial art company up in London, and punk was kicking off. So I thought, I'll go for the job. I won't go to art school. I'll go for the job. And so I went for the job, but I was all art pop and art music. That's why I was into deaf school. That's why I was into guitars
Yeah,
up high.
Yeah,
That's why I was into
XTC, yeah.
XTC. That's why I was into Talking Heads. I still think, like, David Bowie sadly has passed, the Messiah,
yeah.
but we have David Byrne. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the live show, but that live show is fantastic.
Is that the one where they all have the instruments? They're carrying the instruments. They're strapped to them, and they walk around on stage. It's fantastic.
It's the best gig I've ever seen. It's like, again, David Byrne does the thing. He raises the bar and says, I mean, I went to see that gig. I saw it in Tampa locally. And it's that thing, that XTC moment where you're kind of like going, this is so inspired, because I've sat there and I've gone like, God, I've got this idea. Like my last album, Woodland Echoes, okay, I kind of like thought it sounded like a bit of a musical. And I thought it sounded like a fisherman at the beginning and a dark stage, and a fisherman is in a beach hut, and he says, he starts singing the first lyric of the album, and it's like an open book. And he turns around to the beach hut and he looks at it, and instead of being a beach hut, it's a cuckoo clock. And he leaves the beach hut to the beach. Anyway, so I'm thinking like this. So I go along to my agent and I say this stuff, and I say, like, I've got this idea. I want to get a beach hut on stage, and I've got this. It turns into a cuckoo clock, and then he turns around to me and says, well, we've got the Cavern at Liverpool, with the band, full band, and got such and such art. And it just gets, and because of lack of confidence, you kind of go, oh, okay, I'll do it next time. I'll get the on next time, and Peter Gabriel wouldn't think, he'd be like, no, I want that snake on stage, and David Byrne would say, no, I want the stage to be grey, completely grey, and I want to have hands coming in through a curtain, and legs and feet, and I want the band to have no equipment except strapped to their bodies, and I want them to dance in unison. So I want to spend 6 months in a dance center going through moves, so it's all choreographed exactly right, so everything is here, and I want to prepare, so when we go on stage, I want it to be theater. And he stuck by that idea, and he made it happen. And so when I'm sitting there watching this show, I'm thinking, I love you, David Byrne, because you have supreme confidence. You have an artistic, creative eye and ear. And thank you for doing that, because you've inspired everyone here. Even if there are people thinking, I'd rather have the Fred Perry's, back, and can't you just like get that original semi-acoustic guitar you had, and can you not get Tina back and Chris France? Can you not do that stuff? But you're not. He's just doing what he does, and it's like, I salute him for that. So it's super,
Danny Baker always posts a clip of Talking Heads in I suppose the early 80s, claiming it's the greatest live performance he's ever seen, and it is fantastic. Have you seen that, Dave? It's amazing. Where they're all just choreographed and they're all running on the spot when they play. They're phenomenal.
Yeah, it's
astonishing stuff.
Phenomenal creativity. Asperger's is a good thing. It's a good thing to have. It's because it's any kind of Asperger. I mean, it's just means that you're focused. I think if you're focused on an idea and you're relentless, it's like, this is going to happen.
Yeah. So, what else have you got there? Have you got anything else to show us there? What have you got behind you? Other records you pulled out?
Music. I got Black Sea, which is
right.
Wonderful.
Black Sea is great record. Great record.
XTC have cropped up so many times on this.
Yeah,
immensely influential.
I mean, completely. I mean,
in fact, we had Andy Partridge on, and he was brilliant. Talked at great length about all the free cereal packet. Free gifts he collected from the 1950s and 60s, didn't he, Dave? It was amazing. And has a huge collection of toy soldiers.
Well,
yes.
I have had the honour of going to a pilgrimage to Andy Partridge's a couple of years ago with Thomas, and we and Jason Hazley, and we went together to.
Oh right,
yeah.
We spent time in the kitchen, and then you walk through to the studio in the garden, and this is the place where you step over where he wrote Lady Bird.
Yeah.
And you kind of like, you just think, Lady Bird was written here. He's got problems with I think it was with his wife, and he's filtering it through a song, and this is the place, this is the source of it. You're going to the wellspring of love, of Andy Partridge's love, and he is a gnome in this room, and he played me this new album that he's got, played us rather. I mean, I'm sure we were all kind of sitting there just mesmerized by this. Wow, the Messiah is playing us his new stuff, and it was just, it's really hard because I've had a real problem in the past in meeting heroes. I can't seem to.
Who are the other ones?
Paul McCartney. I sat in his lounge watching Stars in Their Eyes, and it's funny because a Neil Finn came on, and we were kind of like, oh, this is really good, and everything, and I'm just sitting there thinking, Penny Lane, and we watched a documentary on ABBA as well, so we're chatting a little bit about that.
What were you doing in his lounge?
Well, it's interesting because I seem to have just found myself in Paul McCartney's lounge, backstage area, house, just in various periods of life. Working with his engineer Jeff Emmerich on
of course,
yeah, of course.
Was,
so is this in Rye in Sussex?
This is in Rye in Sussex, which is my favourite part of the world. I've nearly lived there so many times. The estate agents now will not have me in the shop. But I was there, and Paul said, he said, "What are you doing at the moment?" I was just chatting, and he said, "I've just written a poetry book. Do you want to write some poetry together?" And I went, "Yeah." And my eyes were kind of like going, and then I just never took him up on that because I had no self-worth at all. I just thought, you don't mean that. You don't mean that. You don't mean that. And I left. He said, well, you know where I am. You know where I am. And it's like, and forever I've just been like walking around going, he didn't mean that. Of course he didn't mean that. And yet I've been walking around with that kind of burden of, wow, oh my God. So there's been moments when I haven't been able to deal with it. Like Andy gave me a book to read, Burt Bacharach's autobiography, which I read in the bath, and it was a fantastic book. There's one gem in there about, there's lots of gems, but there was one which was where talking about writing Christopher Cross's Caught Between the Night Moon and New York City. That line?
Yeah.
What a brilliant line. And they were talking about how it came about because he was writing with his wife, Carol Bear Sager, and Carol just suddenly plopped that line in. And Bert was like, oh, that's a really, really good line. And she said, it's actually a song that I was writing with somebody else. So Bert said, well, credit him, bring it in, that's the whole point. And that's that moment where with a song, that's a really important line in the song. Take that line out of that song and it's sort of like, you can't imagine it so much. So that really, the importance of lyrics and the kind of like the puzzle piece going in, where it just is the right puzzle piece, and it can come from anywhere. It can come from, like, I think this other guy lived in Australia or something where they're writing. So it's just that moment of you know, the magic of songwriting, like watching Chris Martin talk about Yellow, and you know, he looks across the room at Yellow Pages, and it was all yellow, you know, that moment of. So when you come to write a song next, and you've got the whole of the music business saying, you need to do that again, we need to have that, you can't recreate the Yellow Pages in the corner.
Yeah.
You know, it's the magic of it, how it comes.
You haven't made that many records, have you?
No, I'm going to rectify that, because now it's possible, because I used to get quite caught up in the politics. You know, I spent 3 years on Arista in litigation, where a new MD came in, but didn't want me to. He wouldn't let me go, but he wouldn't work with me either. I must have been difficult. I must have been difficult to work with, because you know, I was very, very. You know, I had a similar thing that happened to Andy, which is no coincidence really, seeing as, you know, I'm such a kind of like follower, you know, of, it's like we're all Paulicians really. We all fall. I mean, if we'd have gone from Andy's, and Andy would have joined us, and we'd have all gone to Paul's, you know, and then when you're at Paul's, it's like, okay, this is God. We're all kind of Paulicians, you know, but this is the guy where the source is. This is the guy that wrote Penny Lane, you know, and with his partner John, who wrote. It's like, this is what it really is. And yeah.
But you stopped. You left the Heck 100 very soon, didn't you? You only in it about, what is it, one album, and then 18 months or something, and then you left.
Yeah, it was very, very, very quick. Well, because it was the second album syndrome.
Oh right.
There was a pressure to come up with the second album, and I wanted to work with God's producer. And then when I was at Air Studios hanging out there, everybody said Jeff Emerick, and my manager then, Dave Bottrell, who's no longer with us.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah. He played me one of the most, you know, Imperial Bedroom by Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was listening to that endless, and I was just thinking, this sounds wow. And this is the guy that made Penny Lane and Paperback Writer, and this is what he's doing. So he used to walk past the room. And so I just grabbed him and said, Jeff, do you want to, I've got this song, Whistle Down the Wind. You know, do you want to work on it? And he said, yeah. So it was like, oh God, oh my God, this is amazing. The band, not interested at all. They wanted to stay with Bob, God rest his soul, Sargent, who just left the stage. Yeah. So, which is like, you know, and so it was a kind of moment where that second album, the separation began. It was kind of, there was a strange power dynamics in the band anyway, but I definitely lost the leadership at that particular point, you know, because it was like they were, you know, it was them, and then it was Dave and I. It was just this whole thing, because I so wanted them to sound, I wanted us to sound like Imperial Bedroom, and they couldn't see it, and I didn't have the tools of communication. They just said no, you know. It was like, you know, they'd got management, and they said, you know, we're the band, we don't need Nik.
Yeah.
He's not, you know, he just says gobbledygook over our music, you know, stuff like that. And people were listening, and they were believing that. So that's where the split happened. Instead of the lovely, glorious second album produced by Jeff Emerick, because I'd been listening to Beatles, because I just discovered the Beatles, believe it or not.
At that stage, how incredible.
Yeah, I mean, on tour, on the Haircut tour, is where I discovered the Beatles. Because before then, I was mostly into things like soundtracks, like this.
Oh, Stardust.
Okay,
Of
yeah.
course.
That was a monumentous moment.
Brilliant film.
Just a brilliant film. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
fantastic.
Everybody. Do you know anybody that didn't want to be David Essex in that film?
Yeah.
He looked sensational. His white
Or at least
suit
be Keith Moon
in that Spanish castle or what it was. Oh, it was a brilliant film.
That moment that I went back to my room and I wanted to paint it white, immediately. But I couldn't because my mum and dad would have, obviously kicked me out. But I remember just copying that scene and sitting in the corner, like all kind of, oh, it's all gone wrong. So I had a bit of drama about me even then. It was a bit like, so the communication skills roundabout when you're trying to do the second album were not good. I mean, I will go into detail because it's interesting. The power and dynamics of a band anyway are really interesting, and it'd be just nice to just like tell the story and just like tie it in a nice yellow ribbon and let it go. It's like it's because you can't beat yourself up about being this person that couldn't communicate all those years later, because we were all that age. We've all had moments. You and I, we all have moments where we go, if only I'd have not sold that flat, or why did I, and I don't know about you, but when you hit 50, I mean, I'm 60 now, so there's a difference between 50 and 60. I felt like in 50, I just thought, okay, so you haven't got a helicopter pad outside your house, right? Okay, so that didn't happen. And so you deal with the reality of what has happened to your life and the possibility of what could happen now because you're older. And so that kickstarted my health, because I was actually huge just before then. I was about, sometimes I got up to like 15 stone, I was heavy.
Really?
Yeah, I don't remember that at all.
It wasn't very good. Yeah. There's some pictures. I kind of look at them and go, geez, whoa.
Wow.
But, it's not good for your health. So that's why now, I've got a fighting weight, as my father used to say, because he was a boxer.
Right.
Yeah.
I've now got my fighting weight. So I know what my fighting weight is. And I know when I'm above it and when I know when I'm,
Yeah.
It's a good thing to know, because before then I was just like, oh, I look a bit, and then you'd go on camera or something like that and go, oh, it's a lot bigger than I thought. That's a bit weird. What is that? I haven't eaten a thing lately. What's going on there? So now I know that there's a certain weight where it's just like, it's all tickety-boo.
Yeah. So you've got a pile of records behind you still, haven't you? I can see a few more. What else have you got there that you haven't shown us?
Well, I think soundtracks played a huge part. This was the first soundtrack that The Sound of Music.
Oh yeah.
Oh, cool.
I got taken to see that, and so that was the beginning of, because I haven't been like seriously into musical at all, but I've just been into I just think it's there, and the song and the structure. So when I approach an album, I always try to think of it being chapters or episodes, if you like.
Yeah, right.
It's a story. It has to tell a story, and I've never done a concept album, but they are concepts, and that's why when I was told to write, my PR, Mel said, "Can you write a quick thing about this album?" So I started writing, and I went into metaphor completely, and it was just like I was going, "Oh, blimey! There's this fisherman, and there's this bird. It's a bluebird, and he's singing up to the bluebird, and there's a mountain. He goes down the mountaintop, and he goes back up, and then." Okay, so he finds true love in the middle, the forest of love, and then he's back at the coast at the end for always. Okay, and it was filling in. So I sent her that, and she said, I just need the details, like who played what.
On bass, yes. PRs don't want that kind of thing, really. they in fact, if you use the word metaphor with a PR, they tend to gloze over. I
not
find.
Quite sure what you're on about. But it's funny how those anybody with a real interest in kind of complicated song structures, you had a real relationship with records like Sound of Music and Mary Poppins. I can remember Neil Tennant, when we worked with him at Smash Hits, telling me that he thought the greatest middle eight ever written in any song was in Feed the Birds on Mary Poppins. All around the cathedral.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely magical. It's an incredible chord sequence that ends up at where it started. And Yeah, you can see how those things.
Music, story, stage, visuals, the whole thing, and film.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, when that was left a massive impression on me, The Godfather.
Really? Oh, right, yeah.
And then later, this is my wife Sarah and I's favourite film.
Oh, right, don't know.
Phantom Thread.
I don't think I know that.
Don't know that.
Yeah, and Johnny Greenwood did the music for it.
Radiohead. No, Johnny.
It's a recent thing. Yeah.
And House of Woodcock, the song, the theme tune, is the most beautiful piece. Please play it. Honestly, it's a beautiful piece of music. It's Daniel Day-Lewis is a complete genius, and this was his last film, and I kind of like. We've seen it 5 times now at the cinema, and
I've seen this film. I'm sorry, he's a tailor, isn't he?
Yes.
No, it's a fantastic film. Yeah, it's brilliant.
He is a perfectionist, and he's intricately weaving. Let's calm down, Nicholas.
Intricately.
I'm so enthusiastic about music.
We'll all say it. Intricately.
There is so much music. I mean, I'd only get me started on the Isley Brothers and Earth, Wind and Fire and all manner of.
The Isley Brothers.
I mean, The Heat Is On. That album just did my brain in completely.
Right.
I think I was taking dinners at the time as well, so it really did my brain in.
Well, at some stage today, we ought to ask Nick about the greatest record ever made, or he may have talked about it already.
Go on.
That's the traditional ending. Is we ask people to nominate the greatest album ever made, but it.
Okay. Well, it's it is between White Music and Talking Heads 77, but I think I've got to go with XTC because it was such an impact, a real impact, and as an album, it just played such a huge part and changed my life completely. That was the album that I thought, I really I can do this. Because before it was just a dream, you'd watch Stardust and you'd go, well, I obviously can't do that because it's too complicated. And you looked at the music world and the Eagles, and you were in the charts, and because you just thought not going to happen. When I was living in a pub in Lewisham, it's like not going to happen. This stuff is not going to happen. They can't do it. And then punk made it possible. I'm up in London. I'm seeing these bands. I'm working at a commercial art company who we actually did put the Jams album sleeve, and I delivered it to Chris Parry at Polydor.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, because I sat outside his office for hours, and then he came out and he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got a parcel." He said, "I'm sorry." He said, "I thought you were just a kid with a demo," and I thought.
Well, I am.
Yeah,
I could be that kid with the demo. He came to one of our gigs, our first gigs, and he said, "I'm Chris Parry. Tell Nick I know him."
That's very
from
touching.
that moment. It was just so sweet. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And he came in, and we were like, And in fact, it's a beautiful thing. I've just been reminded of a really sweet thing that happened. I spoke to Clive Black last night. Don Black's son.
Oh, right.
And we're speaking, and he said, when I was a kid, I was at Ireland. I got a job at Ireland, being, he said you came in, and nobody would take a meeting, I don't think, with me. Let me get this story right. Clive will tell it much better. And so I looked at Clive. There's this kid and said, "Do you want to hear it?" And he went, "Yeah, all right." So I put it on, and it was this kind of Gary Burton type of influence thing called Good Vibes. And it starts off with me saying, "Let me read my poem, man, let me read my poem." So Clive was just thinking, this is nuts. He said, "What's the name of your band?" And I said, "Haircut 100." And he said, "Oh, okay." And then I walked out because I'd like played it to somebody at Ireland. Okay, it was the guy in the office, 18 probably was.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd made it, I played it to the guy in the office. And he said, "That guy was me." And he said he went to his boss and he said, "I've just had this kid come in and very confident, kind of like came in and said, he said, "What's the name of the band?" He said, "Haircut 100." He said, "Sounds like a bunch of, not having them." And so, yeah, that was that kind of that moment. And so we've reconnected after all this time, not worked together at all in the music business. And now there we were having this great phone call all these years later.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
So what do you do? When are we going to hear you next, Nik?
Because you were going to be touring Britain, weren't you? But I guess that's big cut. Was you playing at the Henley Festival or something, or am I imagining it? You were doing some dates.
Yes, yeah. I've always been, one needs to keep the garage nice and clean. I think that's the important thing. If you've got no money, you have got a dirty garage. It's messy. You haven't even got a garage. You haven't even. I mean, I've got like a tiny apartment. Yeah. It's like you're renting a tiny apartment. I mean, if looking at my career, people just must think, how on earth does that guy survive financially? Through these moments. What was the question?
We were asking what you were doing. You were going to tour, weren't you?
Oh yes. So what I'm doing is this last album 3 years ago, even longer now.
I can say it's quite a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I've got this new one, and it was like ready. I'd finished the recording and it was ready to mix, but then COVID happened. So I'm thinking I bought this audio book about this guy. Changed my mind about Spotify. Really positive about Spotify now. And he said, do this kind of like waterfall marketing or something, where you just literally, it's single by single.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
I'm really late to the party, but I thought, that really suits me as somebody that likes songs. Like if you said, what's your favorite album or song, I'd probably go Bohemian Rhapsody, just because there's nothing like it in the planet ever made. It's just so unique. It's so, I only have to hear the beginning, as we all do, and it just melts. Like Kate Bush, the first time you hear The Man with a Child in His Eyes, and I broke as a man. It was just like, she went to the heart of my species and just completely ripped my heart apart, and I cried, but felt wonderful at the same time. It was just like, who is this woman that can do that to you through music? She's a who is she? And then then you see her, and it's like, she's beautiful, and that was that. But back to what I was talking about, the album. I've got this song called Northern Souls, which is about a couple that go through these sliding doors into a club and keep dancing for the whole of their entire souls. They keep on carrying on. They keep meeting in a club, and they keep dancing because they're soulmates, and they're through their love of music. And all things to do with dance and expression, self-expression. They are in love for their whole lives, and it's eternal and it's timeless, and it's funk, because I love funk. I love it just as much as rock, but funk has that thing where it just really does grab you. I mean, rock grabs you by the balls, but funk kind of like grabs you by the soul. Your very soul is like, and you have to move. You cannot. When you hear September by Earth, Wind and Fire, it's just like, apart from the fact that you think, how on earth did they make that? How do you play like that?
Yeah.
How did you just do that? That is magicians. But so it's funk. So it's like, and I've got real.
The Isleys have got a bit of that too, haven't they? Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's definitely a lot of haircut in the Isleys and vice versa.
So it'll be drip, drip, drip of individual tunes streamed and so forth.
Because I can afford it that way.
Right.
I've said to the guys, because like Andy, who drummed on the whole album, I can't afford to pay you the whole album now, and I can't put it out. But let's focus on one song, finish that, and then go track by track, and then I can do that. Okay, I can do that. I can eke it out like pay as you go phone.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So when are you going to be back in the UK?
Well, I was just over there.
Back in the estate agents in Rye.
Yeah. What we were looking at property again in Rye online like yesterday, because I've watched Rye go up and up and up. I was going to say. It used to be that you could get a house in Mermaid Street for like 86,000 or something. A like lovely house, and I was like, oh well, you can always get a house in right for 87,000, and then it was 95,000,
Yeah, yeah.
170, 300, 8,850.
Yeah.
A million.
Yeah.
You can always get a house in Mermaid Street for £1 million, you know.
There you go. Well, I hope you guess it one day.
Well, let's have a bet. Will it happen? Will I ever have a number one again? Like, who knows? This is the whole point. You never know. I'm going to live the dream. That's the point.
Absolutely.
I'm living the dream.
It's a
if
lottery.
you haven't got that, why do it? What's the point?
Absolutely. Well, Nick,
lovely to talk to you, Dave.
It's been lovely to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you guys.
Really good fun.
Absolute honour.
It's the honour is entirely ours.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.